we're going to focus on fans and conduct, because more violence at Euro 2016 as Germany and Ukraine fans clash. This is from the 12th of June 2016. Confrontations between England and Russia fans on Saturday were followed by more tension in Lille, with chairs and bottles thrown by fans of the two sides. Euro 2016, oh bloody hell, that was an audacious attempt to beat Joe Hart right there. Euro 2016 has been marred by further scenes of violence among groups of supporters ahead of Germany's match with Ukraine at that time. Rival fans clashed in the centre of Lille, close to Gare Flandres, where a number of supporters had been arriving in recent days. Germany and Ukraine fans were seen fighting, throwing chairs and bottles near La Grande Place, an area of bars and restaurants which had earlier seen dozens of supporters, including some from Wales and England, whose teams met at the time in nearby Lons, mixing in a peaceable atmosphere. A group of German fans understood to be part of a far-right contingent threw beer cans at media representatives as they attempted to film close to the station. Some of the bars were later closed to allow a clean-up of the area. The scenes cast a further shadow over the opening days of the tournament in France, which has seen violent confrontations between police and supporters in Marseille in particular. English and Russian counterparts were tear-gassed after clashes near the Old Port area shortly before the meeting of the two sides in their Group B opening match. The 1-1 draw was followed by more unsavoury scenes as Russian hooligans charged England fans after breaking through a poorly segregated area of the stands. UEFA issued a statement to express its disgust at the incidents and threatened that England and Russia could face expulsion from the tournament should any further skirmishes take place. Meanwhile, the French government announced that it will prohibit the sale of alcohol close to stadiums for the remainder of the tournament as part of efforts to curb the violence. Oh, as Kane goes close. But 15th of June 2016, Russia given suspended disqualification. Russia will be thrown out of Euro 2016 if their fans cause further trouble, says European governing body UEFA. The Russians have also been fined £119,000, €150,000, following violent scenes at the game against England in Marseille on Sunday. The suspended disqualification and fine only relate to incidents that happened inside the stadium. There were reports of violent disturbances between rival fans in Lyon on Tuesday evening. And yeah, it's one of them ones where Football Association Chief Executive Martin Glenn wrote to members of England Supporters Travel Club asking them to act in a positive and respectful way. French authorities at that time were increasing security. Oh, it's Kane getting up again. Before the games, 4,000 extra police and security officials on duty before the Russia-Slovakia game and the England-Wales game as well. And the sale of alcohol was restricted in Lille and Lons as well. But the BBC's James Revell said although English and Welsh fans were singing boisterously in bars in Lille on Tuesday night, the streets of the city were calm. Mobile phone footage posted on Twitter on Tuesday, though, showed fans playing football in a calm city square. So it is one of them was mixed reports there. But meanwhile, groups of Russian fans are being deported from France as a result of trouble at the tournament. A bus carrying fans was stopped in a police operation near Cannes on Tuesday. An official said 43 Russian supporters had been arrested and would be charged, released or expelled from the country. Russian supporters from the bus were later transferred to a Marseille police station where the fans were expected to be held overnight. So England were also threatened with disqualification from Euro 2016 but were not formally charged by UEFA. So continuing on that thread, of course England manager Roy Hodgson and also captain Wayne Rooney actually did encourage fans, if you haven't got a ticket, stay away from the games. They're trying to basically ward them off trouble. Well, keep them away from trouble, really, as Dele Alli has a shot charged down. Nathaniel Klein with a low cross stopped. Slovakia literally just camping behind the ball right now. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. But yeah, it is one of them ones where it's kind of an interesting one in regards to that. But there's even more. It is one of them ones where, yeah, even more madness in terms of the violence and activity when it comes to Euro 2016. Because Croatia, sorry for crowd trouble at Czech Republic match. Saturday, 18th of June 2016. Croatia's Football Federation has apologised for the behaviour of fans who caused trouble at Friday's Euro 2016 match against the Czech Republic, as we mentioned, as we actually referred to earlier. Flares were thrown onto the pitch and fighting broke out in the stands. The CFF said a small group of hooligans had stolen joy from Croatian fans and the Croatian team. UEFA European Football's governing body charged both Croatia and Turkey, the latter for instance during their match against Spain on Friday. Its control, ethics and disciplinary body was going to rule on the cases on Monday. So, you know what? We're going to jump to that in just a second, as Slovakia v England is in 5 minutes of stoppage time at the moment. Russia 0, Wales 3, 90 minutes gone there as well, and Slovakia 0, England 0, 91 minutes gone into 5 minutes of stoppage time. Hungary fans clashed with riot police inside Marseille Stadium. 18th of June 2016, Hungary supporters clashed with stewards and riot police inside the Stade Velodrome before their side's Euro 2016 match against Iceland. Fans had been trying to climb a fence at the stadium in Marseille to join up with another group of supporters when stewards got involved. Punches were thrown by supporters before riot police intervened. Elsewhere, Turkey and Croatia were charged by UEFA for disturbances during their matches on Friday. Turkish Football Federation was charged with the setting off of fireworks, throwing of objects and field invasion after some of their fans caused trouble during their 3-0 defeat by Spain in Nice, and Croatia was sanctioned after supporters were involved in crowd disturbances and racist behaviour and in throwing objects and the setting of fireworks as their team played the Czech Republic in Saint Etienne. It actually got quite bad in that game. But Sunday 19th of June 2016, Hungary, Belgium and Portugal federations charged. The football associations of Hungary, Belgium and Portugal are the latest to be charged over by UEFA over the behaviour of their supporters at Euro 2016. The Hungarian Federation was charged with crowd disturbances, setting off fireworks and throwing of objects during their draw with Iceland. The Belgian Association was charged with the setting off of fireworks and throwing of objects during their win over the Republic of Ireland, while Portugal were charged with field invasion during the draw with Austria. The Hungarian case will be heard on June 21st, and the date is yet to be set for the other two hearings. Now, fast forward into today, June 20th, 2016. UEFA fines Croatia over trouble in Czech Republic match. UEFA has fined Croatia €100,000, £77,000 after crowd trouble during their 2-2 draw against the Czech Republic at Euro 2016 on Friday. Referee Mark Clattenburg took the players off in Saint Etienne when the fans in the Croatia end through flares. The Croatian Football Federation has also been banned from selling tickets to fans identified as hooligans, but with tickets for the game against Spain all sold, the sanction was deferred until after the tournament. If there's further Croatian crowd trouble in that match, the final one in Group D for both sides, the sanction would kick in immediately. The fine is the second biggest handed out at the tournament after Russia were fined €150,000 last week. Now, in terms of solutions, Scottish FA, strict liability rules back on the agenda. This is back in the 12th of January 16. So we did mention on the social networks, we'd mentioned some solutions as well. But strict liability, Scottish football could move towards a system where clubs are held responsible for their fans' behaviour, according to the Scottish FA. Police are investigating complaints of antisocial behaviour by Celtics fans in the Scottish Cup win at Stranraer, and that was back in January. In 2013, Scottish clubs rejected a move to introduce strict liability. SFA chief, Scottish Football Association chief executive Stuart Regan said, "We are just about to start our rules revision process for 2016. I am sure it will be back on the agenda. Under current rules, clubs can avoid sanctions if they demonstrate that they have taken reasonably practicable practicable steps to avoid unacceptable behaviour from supporters. When the clubs voted against strict liability being introduced, Reagan said that they felt it was drafted in such a way as to be too onerous to move to strict liability from where we are now was quite a leap. Police Scotland is investigating complaints of sectarian singing and antisocial behaviour at Stair Park, where flares were let off. Now, strict liability, basically what it is UEFA uses a system called strict liability to tackle offensive behaviour at matches. Under strict liability rules, a club is responsible for the conduct of its fans, regardless of whether the club itself is to blame. Sanctions include warnings, fines, annulment of the result of a match, order that a match be replayed, the closure of sections of the grounds and playing matches behind closed doors, and the docking of points. I'm going to come back to that in just a second, because it's Russia 0, Wales 3, full time at Euro 2016. Ramsey on 11 minutes, Taylor on 20 minutes, and Bale adding a third on 67 minutes. So Wales top the group. Because Slovakia 0, England 0. Try as they might, but England could not break down Slovakia. So it's Wales top on 6 points, England second on 5 points, and Slovakia third on 4 points. Remember, the four best third place sides will qualify. So Slovakia could actually qualify for the knockout stages. They could actually still qualify. Now, coming back to the point that we the international continental talking point that we were discussing. Celtic have banned indefinitely 3 individuals connected with the use of pyrotechnics, and in addition, the Scottish Professional Football League was to discuss on the 19th of January sectarian singing by Rangers fans during the championship game against Hibernian at Ibrox back in December. If there is a willingness or appetite to change, then I would like to think we can move that agenda forward. Clubs need to think hard about whether they want such behaviour taking place in Scottish football grounds. Flares are life-threatening, dangerous, and have no place in Scottish football, and anything we can do to stamp them out, I will be very supportive. Now, you can actually add that to Croatia v Czech Republic. But coming back to January 21st now, SPFL face recognition plan concerns clubs. Unrest is growing among clubs after the Scottish Professional Football League announced a plan to introduce facial recognition technology into stadiums. Representatives of all 42 clubs were told of the proposals as part of a discussion about how to tackle unruly fan behaviour. It was interesting, but several clubs told BBC Scotland that they believe the scheme is over the top and too expensive. They are also angry over the lack of consultation on the matter. It is understood league bosses want the Scottish Government to help fund the project, which could cost as much as £4.5 million. The SPFL has set up a working group to examine the issue of unacceptable conduct, such as flares, smoke bombs and sectarian singing, and the facial recognition system was mentioned at a meeting of member clubs at the time. Now, on the 25th of February, a month later, a Scottish Professional Football League request for £4 million in government funding for facial recognition technology at stadiums had been rejected. The Scottish Government says it is up to the governing body and individual clubs to provide the cash. We remain committed to working with football authorities, clubs and Police Scotland to support them in tackling unacceptable behaviour, it said, but ultimately the responsibility lies with the authorities and the clubs. The statement followed discussions between the government, Scottish Football Association and SPFL as well. It is clear that we would not financially support the introduction of facial recognition technology in football stadia, continued the statement. We do, however, welcome continued engagement with the football authorities to discuss practical action they are taking to address the continuing issue of unacceptable conduct at Scottish matches. Now, One interesting thing that actually came out today, the 20th of June 2016, football banning orders for more than 100 under 18s. Football banning orders can stop fans travelling to tournaments like Euro 2016, where there has been violence, and more than 100 under 18s have been banned from attending football matches in the last 3 years, according to figures from Britain's police forces. The youngest person to get a football banning order, FBO, used to prevent disorder and hooliganism, was actually 12 years old. Figures for different police areas vary, with 43 FBOs for under 18s in one forces area and none in many others. People People with FBOs, football banning orders, may have to surrender passports before overseas matches, such as the current Euro 2016 tournament. England fans and those from countries including Russia and Croatia have been involved in violence at the championships in France. FBOs can be issued by courts after a football-related conviction or following complaints by police forces or prosecutors. They can last from 3 to 10 years, and breach of an order can lead to a £5,000 fine or a prison sentence. Now, the figures on FBOs obtained by the Press Association through the Freedom of Information Act cover 3 years up to March 2016. The case of the 12-year-old given a ban came after he threw missiles and was abusive during disorder at Newcastle after Newcastle United were beaten by Sunderland 3-0 in 2013 at Northumbria police said. The same force has the highest number of football banning orders for under 18s. The 43 FBOs in its area apply to 38 Newcastle United and 5 Sunderland fans. So it is an interesting one, but it is a case of 13. The 106 football banning orders for under 18s include 13 in Scotland, identified as fans of Celtic, Hamilton, Hearts, Hibernian, Dundee United, Dunfermline, Motherwell and Rangers. 10 in London, fans of AFC Wimbledon, Brentford, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Fulham, Millwall and QPR. A fan of Turkish side Galatasaray from British Transport Data. None in Greater Manchester, Leicestershire, Derbyshire and more than a dozen other force areas. Jeff Pearson, a senior law lecturer at Manchester University, said there were huge discrepancies in how forces used FBO legislation. Amanda Jackson from the Football Supporters Federation, FSF, said FBOs should be a last resort for children and more should be done to encourage young people to keep out of trouble at games. Police forces were also asked about the oldest people given FBOs, and these included a 60-year-old Arsenal fan and a man of 64 in the Lancashire police area. The government said a total of 2,181 FBOs were enforced, covering all age groups in September 2015. Data was requested from police forces in England, Scotland and Wales, and 8 forces either failed to respond or did not supply requested information. Now, a big question for the Skypers at the moment, I would like to ask first and foremost, violence at Euro 2016, do you think facial and just violence in football in general, can facial recognition and banning orders and also strict liability, the introduction of strict liability, the clubs being responsible for their fans' actions, can those 3 things stop hooligan activity at football? I'd like to ask the Skypers that question. If anyone wants to jump in, let us know. Jamie Bailey, why do you say no to that question?
Because my is that the banning people the club for a handful of people of being a bit awkward. I don't know. For me, it's just a case of it should be dealt internally. Should be dealt internally. It should be reprimanded by the club, and to see if facial recognition works, then the club should be able to deal with it. If they choose not to, then you can actually do something to the club. But should the club get in trouble for a handful of their supporters going wrong? No. They'll just keep coming up. And the problem is the way that people are living nowadays. You're seeing a whole bunch of, like as I said before, the area of Ladbroke Grove, Liam. You know how many...
Sorry, repeat that for me?
You know the area of Ladbroke Grove quite well, don't you?
Yeah, very much so.
It's a case of the amount of people that have, for me, the amount of women that have kids and stuff like that. For some reason, they love to swear in front of their kids. And then they say, oh, you shouldn't say that. And then all of a sudden it should be for the adults. Wait, hold on, why are you swearing? So then so what I'm getting at is where it should be dealt internally at home first. So that when they do go out, they don't get into them type of troubles. And for the club to get the sanction, it just means that a lot of parents don't know how to control their kids, or when they get older, their life lessons have pretty much not been learned until they get to a certain age. And it's just like, well, you've only learned your lesson after you've been banned. And if you go to another game, they're going to ban you. So therefore, you haven't really learnt your lesson. That's just my thing. I think it should be started. It should start from home, and if it doesn't, if you're not really looking to educate people from home, then what's the point in banning a club for people's logistical mistakes?
Well, the interesting thing, the interesting thing for me about it is just purely the fact that at least it's kind of a funny one that the solutions are actually coming from Scottish football, and I'm glad. But I'm actually glad that someone is coming up with legit solutions, because there are so many who will say, oh, we need to stop this, we need to stop that, but won't actually come up with proper solutions. Strict liability, I can see why clubs would be against it. I mean, we've literally just posted a couple questions on the social networks. Can strict liability for clubs, facial recognition, and FBOs stop football violence? That's kind of where we're going. Whether it be violence at Euro 2016, whether it be elsewhere, but for me, I think Jamie, you're spot on in terms of stopping it starts at home. Where it's like you've got, but the only issue I kind of have with that is that obviously there are a lot of adults who have had banning orders. I mean, you look at, the government said a total of 2,181 football banning orders covering all age groups were in force in September 2015. So, I mean, you look at the amount of trouble that's happened at Euro 2016. It's kind of a difficult one with Euro 2016 because there are so many conflicting reports, and generally there's not really for a few days at least there wasn't any real consistency in the reports. There was a lot of stuff being said, then stuff being proven wrong by short video clips. There were short video clips showing stuff, but maybe showing it out of context. There was a lot of conjecture. But coming back to football violence in general, I mean, strict liability, UEFA using that system to tackle offensive behaviour at matches, and under strict liability rules, a club is responsible for the conduct of its fans, regardless of whether the club itself is to blame. Sanctions include warnings, fines, annulment of results of a match, order that matches be replayed, the closure of sections of the grounds, playing matches behind closed doors, and the docking of points. I think strict liability, I can see why clubs would have problems with it, because it's a little unfair, because that would be a whole club being punished for the actions of a moronic minority, especially if that club, let's say for instance that club does a lot and is always like, no, don't do this, we don't want you to do this, you're going to get us in trouble. It's a bit unfair on those clubs who come out straight away and have swift draconian punishments. If they're literally, like Celtic for instance, banning indefinitely 3 individuals connected with the use of pyrotechnics. That was back in January. So Celtic obviously took action. So it would be a bit unfair for them to take that action and then start punishing them on top, dependent on what the punishment is. I mean, Hungary, Belgium, and Portugal federations were charged. It's one of them was Turkey and Croatia. They've been charged as well. You've had England and Russia, with Russia being threatened in terms of the suspended DQ, disqualification from the tournament. I mean the bottom line is, like, I mean it's just one of them where there needs to be some sort of things put in place to stop this. And I think facial recognition is actually a really good idea. On a personal note, I think that's a very good idea, because it'd be one of them was, you look at how many cameras are around the stadium these days. If a disturbance all kicks off, I mean, you could literally you could have cameras trained on the crowds at these big matches like European tournaments. You could have a couple of extra cameras just focused on just basically focused on the crowds. And if your face gets recognized by the facial recognition system, then you get sanctioned. So I think facial recognition is a good idea. Strict liability, it would be not only a little difficult to enforce, but at the same time, it would be a little difficult to enforce, but at the same time, it would be a little unfair at times. So, don't know. Strict liability to me, nah, not really too sure. Not really too sure that can work in theory or in practice. But it is one of them ones where I think, I mean, what? It would only cost £4.5 million to set it up. Are you telling me the SPFL is that poor and they can't afford £4.5 million? That would be my concern, because I mean, considering what kind of problem you're potentially going to stop, or at least you're fighting against, I think it's a very interesting thing. So it's one of them. I think the facial recognition. It's a shame. It's a shame that the Scottish government that the request from the SPFL, Scottish Professional Football League. I think the £4 million request. It's a bit of a shame. It's a little bit of a shame that didn't get approved, that got rejected. But at the same time, I think football needs to find it for itself. But these banning orders being used, I am in favour. I am definitely in favour of football banning orders, because at the end of the day, what that does is that it teaches you that you can't get away with the stuff. And I said, facial recognition and football banning orders could actually work hand in hand to actually combat bad behavior of football. Because with the quality of high definition camera equipment and cameras in general, it'd be quite easy to start IDing people and banning people. And then those who don't cause trouble, it gives those individuals a chance to potentially go to games. So I think it's one of them ones. I think football banning orders and facial recognition could be used to great effect to at least start to eradicate football violence. But as has been said, it does need to start. It does very much need to start at home. It very much does need to start at home in terms of education and training. But if you can't start it there, then you get it at football. You get banned. I mean, do any of the Skypers want to jump in on that as well? Do any of the Skypers want to jump in? Let us know. But I just think it's one of them ones. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just thinking that football banning orders and facial recognition in tandem could actually stop it. So yeah, that would be where I would go. If any of the Skypers want to jump in, if any one of the Skypers want to jump in, please let us know. But yeah, I said it's just one of them ones where it's yeah, it's just fun. I mean, Jamie Bailey, did you want to jump back in on that?
Yeah, just wondering. Just looking at just remembering one of the points that you made. Just thinking, should this have not done this? Should the FIFA have not done this years ago? And I look at it as, could they have done this years ago, or is this just basically down to the political problems that the EU Brexit seems to be bringing towards this summer? I do question what's happening. Basically, there's more fights and more things happening when political reforms seem to be taking place in every country, and they seem to be happening right now in the summer when Euro 2016 and the Copa America is on. two major tournaments in two different areas of the world. So I'm just wondering if this could have been done years ago, and if it couldn't, is this down to more politics than football for what's happening?
That's actually not a bad point. That's not a bad point. I'll run with you on that, actually. To be honest, it could be more, but it could be politics. To be perfectly honest, because, just purely, that's quite an interesting point, actually. Because we just put out on the social networks, can facial recognition and football banning orders be used in tandem to stop football violence? I'd also add, could strict liability for clubs do that as well? But I think it could be more politics, because you look at some of the bans that have been handed down from UEFA, especially in relating to racist chanting. Those bans have been pretty poor. So I think it's one of them. I think it's one of them ones where, I don't know. I think it's one of them ones. It could be politics stopping it. I mean, I'm hoping it's not, but I think it potentially could be. I mean, in Scotland, it's a money thing because they can't raise £4 million for it, and they couldn't get it off the Scottish government. But it is an interesting one. It is a very interesting one. I mean, Jamie, do you think it's more? Do you think it's more politics? Why stuff like facial recognition and football? Well, why facial recognition hasn't been brought in at football grounds to curb football violence?
Well, as you look at the what everybody said about the Ruskies, they said, they've been training for this for years. So you look at Putin. He could have easily told something. He could have easily had a deal with the French president or prime minister, and said, "Whatever happens, keep it under wraps. Don't care who gets in trouble. Just keep it under wraps." Things that are just little things like that. So it could be politically motivated, and everybody knows politics and football doesn't mix. So I'm just seeing it as could this have happened a few years ago? Possibly. But it wouldn't have been any longer than probably 2012, because nobody was as much as that's 4 years ago. Cameras weren't really up to date up until probably 2012 anyway. We were still using digital Polaroids, I'm pretty sure, and the phones weren't as technologically gifted as they are now. I just have a feeling that the political movement, the reason for most of the changes starting to come in, and the change of presidency probably might be the reason why. The change of FIFA presidency might be the reason why we're actually hearing about this now, when it probably was brought up years ago, but wasn't really talked about. So there's just too many sides of this where I think somebody in politics has had a bit of had a hand in this in football, to the point where somebody what's his name, who was the last president again?
Last FIFA president, yeah, it was Sepp Blatter.
Yeah, and the UEFA president the UEFA president. See, I've already moved on.
He's moving on, you know.
Yeah, Black. It could have been that Blatter was put into that position. Like Putin could have said, "Look, we're going to help you as much as we can just to keep you in business, but don't think we can hold on for too long," sort of thing. Or you never know. Just any of those little problems, just any of those little things, and the stranglehold of this whole Brexit thing just seems to be a big major point as well. So I'm just unsure of what's happening. And I think it might be politically motivated with these talks, but it could have happened years ago. And then by the time we get to this point, there's a lot less fighting, and a lot more talking about the football.
Is that in terms of facial recognition could have happened a long time ago?
Yeah, I think it could have been done at Euro 2012. Could have probably been done at World Cup 2010. Although we don't know what the proposition was like for South Africa. Again, the Copa America is in the US this year. They could easily have facial recognition. Everybody knows what the arms deal that America has. So I just look at it as over a period of time. I just think at the moment, it's a political motivation where things are now starting to change up in that world, and on the ground, so to speak, football is not being as controlled by Putin and other people where they could have been probably 4 years ago.
No. I mean, I think there's very much. I think there's very much a. I think is the lack of facial recognition to combat football violence politically motivated. I think potentially. I think potentially, but I don't know if that's the main. I just don't know if that's the main reason. To be honest, I don't know if it's really one of the main reasons. And the Brexit thing, I think, is more money orientated in terms of how much you're gonna make, how much you're gonna save, how are transfers and work permits gonna change. I think that's more what Brexit has got. But in relation to that, but I think the lack of facial recognition in football banning orders, I think it's I don't even think it's politically motivated. I think it's just one of them ones where it's like I just think it's one of them ones where it's just a slowness from the powers that be in football again in terms of fixing a problem. And fixing a problem that's been there for a long time. I mean, it's been bubbling on. I think it's been bubbling under the surface for a while. Football violence, but it's one of them ones where it's really kind of come to the surface in skirmishes and clashes and altercations at Euro 2016. I think it is very much still somewhat of an epidemic. Football hooliganism, I think, is still somewhat of an epidemic. I think it is still a little bit of an epidemic. So, well, at least in the modern game, but it's just not. I think it's just one of them ones where it's been. I think it's just one of them ones where it's been kind of swept under the rug to an extent. But I think UEFA have kind of across the bear in terms of strict liability. Actually, it's kind of a funny one coming back to that. I think UEFA very much have somewhat of a major cross to bear in regards to the trouble at Euro 2016 with their scheduling. I mean, scheduling matches like, say, your England v Russia or your England v Wales. Not England v Wales. Like your England v Russia's like at 8 o'clock. It's like, I mean, I don't know. Basically the prohibition of alcohol to an extent is a good idea, but I think it's one of them was where UEFA might not have looked at, and the French police might have actually underestimated the amount of potential trouble, because there are a lot of reports saying saying basically that the French authorities were basically stretched to the point of breaking in terms of how much staff they actually had. So apparently British Transport Police actually helped and drafted in some forces. So it's kind of like, well, British Transport Police, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Confiscate all the English fans' Oyster cards when they get back? No, that's a bit of a bad mind comment, but still, it's just, I said, at least those two are potential solutions to the problem. But I think Jamie Bailey's right, where the issue has to start at home. Although if you're an adult, it's a case of, I don't know how much education is really going to do in that regard. It's just swift draconian action. needs to be done. And also it's a case of all the powers that be, all of the clubs need to agree on draconian sanctions. That would be the thing, because you always get it with football clubs. They just can't agree on stuff. They can't agree on this, they can't agree on that. And it's like, if you can't agree on stuff, how the hell are you ever gonna get to some unified theory on it? So I think it's going to be interesting to see if facial recognition ends up coming into football. I said, don't think it's politically motivated. I actually really don't think it's politically motivated, but you never know, it could be.